We gave it an extra 10 minutes. We understand there's a lot of traffic, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully people will join us as we go through this. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Christina Bryant, and I work for the Department of Public Works, and I'm the project manager on the DPW side for the Less Waste Better Baltimore master plan. So I see some familiar faces. I know a lot of you guys joined us for our first round of meetings. And during our first round of meetings, we focused on any challenges to the existing system, solid waste system, and then we also talked about some recommendations for enhancing our system and diverting trash away from the landfill. Tonight's meeting is especially special because throughout those meetings, we also put out a survey, and we had a less waste email address, and we captured a lot of different recommendations from all stakeholders throughout the city. And tonight we're just going to be exploring those different recommendations that were made, looking at our survey results, and then outlining the path forward on how exactly we're going to have the plan and when it will be available, et cetera, et cetera. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ross, who's going to be our facilitator tonight, and he can take it over from there.
Thanks, everybody. Hello. Can you hear if I speak at this volume? Is this okay, or do we need to use the microphone? It's okay? If I speak like this? Okay. So, welcome. Thanks for coming. I know you're busy. You have busy lives. So thank you for taking time out of your evening to be here and listen to what we have to say to you. Ask us questions. If something's unclear, it's the center one. Yeah. Good. So that's really our purpose here today, and I'm pleased to be here with you to help facilitate that conversation. My colleague Rachel Lanspa is also in the back. Just a note, we are making a video recording of the meeting so that you're aware of that. And then we have from Geosyntec, Jeremy Morris, who in a few minutes will come to the front and share some of the information on the project that he's been leading. Just a point of clarification, Nexite Group, my company, we're a subcontractor to Geosyntec. We work for Jeremy, and our role is to help plan and facilitate and document these public meetings. So that's what I'm here to do today. But really, Jeremy is the technical lead for the project, and he's the one who will be answering a lot of the tough questions tonight because I don't have the knowledge to do so. We're also privileged to have Second Chance as part of the team that's working on this project, and Mark Foster's here in the audience today, so we're happy to have Second Chance along with us. Your mission is really important and germane to what we're all trying to accomplish with this effort to improve the way that Baltimore manages its solid waste. The agenda here is relatively straightforward. I don't know that we're going to need to go to 8 o'clock, but we can if we want to. We'll have some opening remarks. Very quickly, we'll get into this presentation that Jeremy will lead, and you can read for yourself the points that we'll be covering there. Then we have ample time here, 45 minutes budgeted for all of the questions and discussion that we need to have, and then we'll try to wrap up by 8. If not, if we're finished sooner, we'll end sooner. So that's our agenda. The website for this project is shown here. If you want to find any information about what's happening with this activity, you can go to this website. All of the reports for the public meetings as they're done are posted here. Communications about the project are posted here. As the technical reports will be finalized, they will be posted on this website. You can also find contact details to provide input through any time. We're taking fairly deliberate action to make sure we are as transparent as we can be with this project, and that we are as consultative as we can be with this project to make sure we get all of the input from all of the variety of stakeholders that have something to say and something to contribute to this problem which affects all of us here in the city. Christina already covered this, but the scope and the boundaries for this evening are about the master planning effort. And so that's what we're talking about. It's focused on options, not making any final decisions, but analyzing and defining potential options that the city could consider for improving solid waste diversion, recycling, and disposal. And Jeremy will talk much more about that. And you can see the research that we've done, the consultations that we've done with residents, businesses, community groups, all of the stakeholders that we can possibly think of that might have a role to play in addressing this issue. We've made a point to try to reach out to those folks. And what you'll hear tonight are some initial findings from some of those consultative efforts, the survey, as Christina mentioned. And then the main goal of this is to review those findings and answer any questions you have about them. So that's really our purpose. I hope that's clear. And I've used this word stakeholders a bunch. It's kind of a generic word. What does it mean? This is what it means. We reached out to anchor institutions in the city, to businesses, to community organizers and leaders. I won't read all of this to you, but you can read it for yourself. We have tried to be pretty methodical and think about what are the different groups that might have a role to play in this conversation, and make a point of trying to solicit input from those community groups, from those stakeholder groups. So hopefully that's a fairly quick introduction to the overall project, the purpose of this evening, what we're here to do. Before I turn it over to Jeremy to start getting into some of the project reporting aspects, are there any questions about what we're here to do, why we're here, the overall purpose? Is anything unclear at this point? We're good? Okay. So then, Jeremy, I think this is where I hand to you to review a little bit about the project and some findings.
Thank you, Ross. And likewise, I hope everybody can hear me if I'm not exactly at the microphone every time. So when we met last time in February, March, and we had the first two community meetings where we outlined the original purpose of the project and what we were trying to do, we presented some fast facts about the state of solid waste management in the city, and these are available as a fact sheet on the city's website. But essentially, some of the challenges that we're looking at, that we asked people to consider in the last meetings, are the city-owned landfill, which is the only solid waste landfill in the city of Baltimore, is rapidly reaching its current permitted capacity. So even though it's undergoing a permit expansion to increase its capacity at the moment, there's still a distinct lack of long-term disposal capacity in the city. Bresco, the waste-to-energy plant located just off 95, is an aging facility. There's been recent legislation enacted which is going to make it even more challenging for that facility to continue operating. But even that aside, it's an aging facility, and when you're looking at long-term planning, it may not be wise to think about relying on such an aging facility for the very long term. This master planning effort is intended to take us beyond 2040, so a 25, 30-year outlook in terms of where the city's going. And then a third challenge we have is the city's recycling rates are very low. The Maryland Department of the Environment collects data and measures recycling in all of the jurisdictions, counties in Baltimore City and Maryland, and we have one of the lowest here. So, that aside, we did ask for a lot of input on those. In this meeting, we're really going to be focusing on this component of the challenges. So what can we do to increase our recycling rate, improve waste diversion? We're going to get to what should we do with what's left, the material that we don't think we can recycle, in a subsequent stage of this project, and there will be opportunities for public input and information exchange for that. But tonight I really want to focus on this aspect of the project. So what are we doing here? It's a master planning effort that's intended to reduce the amount of waste that we generate. Most importantly, recycling, reuse, diversion, etc. are all fantastic cures to the waste problem, but what we really want is a hefty dose of preventative medicine as well. So what can we do to reduce the amount of waste that's generated in the first place? Then how can we maximize material diversion, reuse, recycling, etc., getting material out of the disposal stream so that we can identify, as I say at a later stage, what are the best options for disposing of what's left. So as I mentioned, we're really going to focus on these two aspects of the project in terms of what we discussed today. So our process for plan development, this is taken directly from the outline that we have on the website. Hopefully people have seen this before. It's a three-step process. Step one is information gathering, step two is analysis, step three is developing a plan and making some recommendations to DPW for what we think the city should do over the long term. So we're currently about at this stage of the process. We've almost finished the information gathering stage. We have a little bit of work left to do there. and we're very heavily into the analysis stage, but we certainly haven't finished it. And we wanted to share with people where we are and where we think we're going before we get to the end, so that people have a chance to see that, before we get too far into it. So if we look at what we've done so far, we completed a winter waste sort in January. So you can only develop a plan if you have data. So we needed data on what does the city's waste look like? What does the city's recycling look like? What are the materials that are present in those, in the waste stream, in the recycling stream? What kind of materials are smallholders bringing to the city's drop-off facilities when they do home renovations? Only when we quantify what we have can we really do a good job of trying to decide where the material could go other than being disposed of. So we completed a winter waste sort. That report is available on the website, and I would encourage people to look at it. We're doing a summer waste sort as well, which is the bottom arrow here. That's scheduled for June, so by the end of June that should be completed, and I would expect that the report would be available sometime in July. So those two waste sorting activities will really provide the data that we use to complete the analysis. As Ross mentioned, we have completed 2 community meetings previously to introduce the project and to solicit input from residents and other stakeholders on what are the challenges facing the city and how do you think that we could overcome some of those challenges. So we have reports on those community meetings. We have full videos available for people to watch. If you enjoy watching 2 hours of public meetings, then there are YouTube videos available for you at the website. We also conducted an online survey, solicited input from people, and I'm going to provide some of the information from that today. We received information via email and social media outlets, and all of that is combined into our reports. So those are where we ask the public and other stakeholders to give us suggestions on where the city's solid waste management and recycling system should go. We've reviewed the existing system in Baltimore, both DPW's infrastructure and systems and programs, as well as the role of the private sector currently. And we've also completed some benchmarking activities where we looked at what other jurisdictions around the country have achieved in terms of waste diversion and increasing recycling, so that we can see what we can learn from those efforts. The reports on the review of the existing system and benchmarking are currently under review. They're, I think, quite close to being ready for publishing, and as soon as they are, they'll be available on the website. So again, if you're interested in this process, I really encourage people to check back at the website on a pretty regular basis, because every time we finish a report, it's approved for publishing, then it will be published on the website there. So that's information gathering, which we're almost at the end of. Then during the analysis step, we're in the process of reviewing options for improving waste diversion and assessing what the potential impact of implementing those options would be on how much waste would be left. So if we implemented a composting program for food waste from residential houses, for example, what impact would that have on the amount of waste that we have left to handle? And obviously at the end of that process, we'll be calculating what's left so that we can then look at what options are best for managing that material, and that will come at a later stage of the project. So that's where we are right now. With that, we now know quite a lot about where the city is in terms of total waste generation and our current recycling rate. And this is information that I previously shared at the first set of community meetings. Welcome. So last time I talked quite a bit about the fact that the way that Maryland measures waste generation and recycling in particular is divided into 2 sets of materials. Those that fall under the Maryland Recycling Act, or MRA, and those that don't. But we do recycling of both of those waste streams. So if we take the total waste generation in the city, which is about 1.6 million tons a year, it's a lot of material, then MRA waste makes up about 40% of that, and our recycling makes up some proportion of that. We know quite a bit about what that material looks like because it's data that's reported to the state, recorded. So we have some idea of what MRA recyclables look like. Similarly, non-MRA waste, things that don't count towards our recycling number, which make up the majority of the material in the city, almost 1 million tons just by itself, Quite a lot of that material is actually recycled, over half of it. And we know something about what that material looks like as well, because that's also reported to the state. So we know quite a bit about our current recycling, but we don't know very much actually about what's in the trash stream, because that just gets reported as trash. So a big part of our effort now is to really understand what's in the trash stream. And actually, we need to stop thinking about things in terms of MRA and non-MRA, because that's just an administrative process. What we really want to look at is trash versus recycling. So if we take this process, which we calculate a city's published MRA recycling rate of 24% using that data, or we can calculate an overall recycling rate of 39% if we look at all recyclables over the total waste generation. What we really need to do is take that bar that's divided into MRA and non-MRA and just combine it. So we have trash, we have recycling, and we have what's going on currently in terms of organics. And that gives us about 1 million tons of trash that's currently going for disposal. About 600,000 tons of material that's already recycled, and we know quite a lot about. And then about 33,000 tons of material that's currently processed in an organics processing facility, generally complexes. So this is what we're dealing with. And ultimately the goal of our analysis here is, first of all, to reduce the size of that orange waste bar. The less waste we generate, the less that we have to manage. So the first goal is to try and reduce that, and then the second goal is going to be, what can we do to move material from that orange trash bar that we have to dispose of into the recycling bar and into the organics diversion bar, so that we can really make the orange bar as small as possible and the green and the blue bars as large as possible. And in a nutshell, that's what we're trying to do here, in very simple terms. So, how do we go about analyzing the city's waste flows and waste types and figure out how to divert some of the materials that are currently being disposed of away from disposal? For that, there's three things we need to do. We need to understand waste flows and materials. We need to look at what options are available and what would be supported by stakeholders in the city, which is why we did so much outreach. And then we need to objectively assess the performance of these different options as best we can against each other, so we can see which ones would give us the best bang for the buck in terms of overall waste diversion, costs, job creation, environmental benefits, etc. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We break this up into 3 steps, starting by understanding waste flows and materials. We've looked a little bit already with coloured bars about what the quantities of materials are that are part of the waste stream in the city, but it's a lot more complicated than that. And this is a highly simplified flowchart which tells us where waste goes in the city once it's generated. So we have two sources of waste, essentially. We have residential waste, everything that we generate in our homes. And then we have what we call commercial waste, which is everything that's generated somewhere else. Businesses, universities, hospitals, stadiums, etc. Those two waste streams are managed somewhat differently, but essentially what we're really, and this is based on available data, this is our picture of where materials go at the moment. So this blue bar here represents everything that's currently recycled, primarily from the commercial sector. This yellow bar here represents everything that goes to Bresco, the incinerator, in the commercial sector and the residential sector. This red bar here is everything that goes for landfill disposal, primarily from the residential sector. This green bar here is everything that's currently composted. And this orange bar here is everything that goes somewhere, but we don't exactly know where it goes. But we know that there's about 280,000 tons of material that's going somewhere, but we don't exactly know where it's going. We suspect that it's going to rubble landfills in surrounding counties. So most of that material there is probably construction and demolition type material, maybe some soil, etc. But it's going to a disposal facility that's outside of the city, so it's very hard for us to track. But ultimately, what we're really interested in terms of understanding waste flows and diverting them from where they're currently going to a different place, is understanding what's going to Bresco, what's going to Quarantine Road, the landfill, and then understanding a bit more, as much as we can, about where that other waste stream is going, and whether that could be diverted. Because even if it doesn't get disposed of in the city, it's still getting disposed of, and we really want people recycling it rather than disposing of it. So as I said, we did a waste sort in the winter where we looked at residential trash, so everything that's picked up in the green load packers that the city runs through the streets and comes and collects from your house once a week. We divided the material into 7 sample classifications, which are shown with the little icons on the left-hand side here, with our final one being everything that doesn't fit into one of those 10 classifications just gets classified as unclassified. We can see here food makes up about 25% of what we're throwing away in our homes, which, that's something that we can do something about. So, other recyclable portions of the waste stream are quite small, but this is something that could be diverted from disposal, and we see that there's a lot of it, particularly in our residential trash. So that's food for thought. Pardon the pun. We also looked at what small haulers are disposing of. This is material that comes every time you do a home renovation, or someone builds a new house, or demolishes an old house, or cleans up a yard, or cleans up an alley that's full of trash, or moves house and decides to throw away what's in their basement. This is the material that generally ends up going to small haulers and then disposed of. And we can see here we have a lot of construction type material. A lot of 30% of it is bricks, rubble, broken concrete, etc. A lot of it is wood. Quite a large amount is trash. A decent amount is broken furniture and bulky items that could potentially be repurposed if there was a way of dealing with those. So this helps also build a picture of what the material looks like and where our opportunities for achieving some diversion are. And then if we take all of the data that we have available and add it up and try to come up with a total estimate of what different types of materials there are in the waste stream between residential sources, which DPW primarily collects material from these sources. So that's something that's under the direct control of DPW, if you like, that they can influence quite easily. And then we have these quantities of material that are generated in the commercial sector. They tend to be moved and hauled and disposed of by private contractors. It's a little bit more difficult to influence those, although it can be done. But you need a combination of incentives and regulations to try and get more to happen in this sector. And then we have a total. So a couple of things that jump out to me here, for sure. We've got a lot of food waste in the city that's currently going for disposal, and we can do a lot of this material. It's generated by both the commercial and the residential sector, but there's a lot of that material around, and that could go somewhere else. We also see that from the commercial sector, there's a lot of mixed construction and demolition waste, which, if we really look at it and try to figure out what's there and what value it might have, there's potentially a lot of diversion available there. So there are some other diversion potential avenues. There's a lot of cardboard and paper currently generated that could potentially go in other places. But really, when I look at this table, those are the two things that jump out to me as being very obvious targets for consideration. So that's understanding our waste flows and materials a little bit. So let's look at what options are available and what would be supported by residents and stakeholders. Because if we're going to implement a new program, for it to be successful, it has to be something that people embrace and want to do, rather than something that's forced on them. So let's start with the survey results. So the public input that we solicited from people to ask, hey, what do you think we should do? I'm only presenting the results of the survey report here, which I would really recommend that people look at. It's very short, it's highly graphical and pictorial. It's put together by Nexite, Ross's firm. Does a really nice job of taking boring survey data and presenting it in a way that's quite easy to read. Remember, there is public input that we received at the meetings via emails, via social media, etc. That has all been captured, but I'm not presenting it here because I prefer to present Nexite's nice, colourful report than boring data. But we have incorporated everyone's thoughts, however they were provided to us in our analysis. So in the survey, we had about 2,000 responders, which is pretty good. So 2,000 people started the survey and provided some input. About 1,700 people got all the way through the 12 or 13 questions that were in the survey. here we have a distribution of where people that took the survey reside, because we asked people what their zip code was. So you can see some concentration in certain neighborhoods, but the thing that pleases me here is there were responses from every portion of the city, because there's very few places apart from down here, which is mostly just industrial areas and landfills. So, you know, all neighborhoods, people took some effort to provide some input, and that's very encouraging for us. We also see quite a nice distribution in terms of age, with that pie chart being quite well distributed between the 18 to 35s, the 36 to 50s, and etc. So, you know, across different demographics, people were providing good input, and across different households, people were providing input. So hopefully we've managed to capture some quite diverse opinion in terms of people's recommendations for what we should do. This text is probably a little bit small to see, but we basically asked people to provide a rating of their current level of satisfaction with existing services in the city. And we can really group these into three kind of group areas. People were mostly satisfied with the service they're getting in terms of curbside trash collection, curbside recycling, drop-off facilities, the range of materials that are accepted, etc. On the other hand, people were overall quite dissatisfied with litter removal services, DPW's reaction time and response to illegal dumping, the amount of recycling that's made available in public spaces, and particularly during special events. So there's something that we see we can certainly make some improvements on, and in the immediate term. And then we have this group in the middle where people were kind of satisfied, kind of not satisfied, but not pretty neutral overall. And they're things like access to having bulk waste either dropped off at a convenience center or collected, used tire disposal, electronics recycling, etc. So, this gives us some nice breakdown of where the immediate focuses could be, and we see here that that's in these areas down at the bottom. So that's the current situation. We also asked people what some of the challenges were to recycling more, because that's something we have to address if we want to get not only more recycling, but better quality recycling, and that people aren't putting things in the recycling bin that shouldn't be in there, that should really be in the trash instead. We asked people what some of the challenges they faced were. And interesting, a lot of people aren't really sure if things are recyclable. So some information, some educational type material that helps people really understand what's recyclable versus what isn't would be very helpful there. And then some of the reasons why people don't divert more waste given were difficulty accessing composting and recycling, uncertainty again about what type of materials are recyclable and where they can go, and then some things that are challenges for all of us, finding foodstuffs that aren't excessively packaged, being able to separate food from materials that are recyclable. So there's classic example being a pizza box. When the cheese grease gets on the lid of the pizza box, then the pizza box lid ceases to be recyclable and needs to go somewhere else. So definitely some input there about improvements to education, information, etc. And then lastly, we asked people to kind of think to the future about what could the city aspire to be, where could we go, what more could we do. And really interestingly to me, almost 100% of people support policies that lead to improved waste reduction, recycling, and reuse. So, it's not that we're looking to force something on the community here. This is something that almost everyone in the community embraces and says that they would love to have. So, a lot of people said, provide more literature, provide more information, I can do a better job. I need more access to recycling, the more access you provide, the more you can get. We should be encouraging waste reduction from all the construction and demolition projects that are going on in the city, trying to get as much of that material out of the street as possible. And then provide more alternatives to waste disposal, so more options for composting, more options for recycling. So you can see overall that there's very good public support for the type of things that we're talking about. Finally, in terms of learning, as as I mentioned, we did some benchmarking, so we looked at what some other progressive cities around the country have done and what we can learn from them. So Boston has recently enacted a zero waste plan, so we wanted to look at what they thought they could achieve in terms of implementing that. Charlotte, North Carolina, similarly, has recently enacted a circular economy plan where you're trying to reduce the amount of waste that ends up being disposed of because it stays in a circular economy and things get reused and recycled. So they're two nice examples of cities that aren't doing that, but they've recently passed plans where they want to do that, and that's something that we can learn from, because that's where Baltimore is. We're not doing these things, but we would like to. So we can learn from what they're doing. Austin and Portland are examples of other cities that have really moved quite far in terms of increasing waste diversion and really doing a lot of recycling. So we can learn from their experience. And then Charleston similarly was a kind of an in-between case of a city with aspirations, but encountering some challenges in terms of getting where they want to go. I won't talk a lot about this, but here's an example from benchmarking of what we can learn. So Baltimore, for example, we passed the polystyrene ban in terms of allowing expanded polystyrene to be used for single-use serviceware containers for food outlets. So that's what we've done. But we can look at other jurisdictions, and they've really done a lot of things with a lot of categories. Many of them have banned single-use bags or other single-use plastics. They have ordinances in place requiring more construction and demolition, debris recycling. A number of them have got programs in place for diverting food and yard waste from disposal, bottle redemption programs, etc. So a lot of these jurisdictions we can really learn a lot from in terms of regulations that they've enacted to improve recycling. And then 3 of the jurisdictions, as I mentioned, have zero waste type initiatives where they're really trying to get to as close to zero waste disposal as they can. And we can learn a lot from that. So our benchmarking report is pretty close. It's under review at the moment. Hopefully pretty close to being ready. So where else can we get some input for where we want to get to? Well, Baltimore City's produced a number of strategic plans. So first of all, Baltimore has a sustainability plan. It was produced this year by the Office of Sustainability. And this outlines some specific goals in terms of where they want us to get to in terms of waste management. So the sustainability plan outlines zero waste aspirations for the city. So the sustainability plan says they want to develop a zero waste plan. They want to look at options like pay-as-you-throw, so a volume-based waste disposal system as opposed to just everyone paying the same amount. They want to increase recycling. They want to address the litter issues that we have in the city. They want to make legislative and policy changes that will support those. And importantly, they want to support the Waste to Wealth initiative, where we get some job creation and revenue as a result of implementing some of these ideas, with a real focus on food waste, construction, demolition, and wood. So if we look at the sustainability plan, we really have some goals that we can look to there. Similarly, the Office of Sustainability, in cooperation with the ILSR, recently developed a food waste recovery strategy. So obviously that gives us some food waste reduction goals. So what that says it wants to do by 2040 is achieve an overall 50% food waste reduction, and then a very high diversion rate of food from different generators within the city away from disposal towards composting and digestion. So if we look at what the city's already said they want to do, we can gain a lot from implementing that. And then finally, Baltimore has a climate action plan, and a key goal of that is to achieve a 15% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2020 to below the 2010 level. So we've got to get cracking if we're going to achieve that by 2020, but we have some numbers here that we can use to guide where we're going. We can measure, we can try and measure the predicted performance of what we think we're going to implement in terms of how would it help the city achieve these goals. Because the city's already told us that's what they want to do. And then finally, so we've looked at understanding the material we have, we've looked at what options are available and how they would be supported by residents, what's been strategically laid out by the city. So now we want to objectively assess the different options that we have in terms of their expected performance. So, I'm an engineer, and this is where the engineering comes in. So we're trying to put together a really objective methodology so that we can compare really quite different options. Composting is very different to construction and demolition recycling, but we can put together some common approaches within the methodology for assessing what each of these options would achieve in terms of total waste diversion. So if we take those orange bars that we have right now with 1 million tons of waste in, if we implement each of these options, how much would it reduce that orange bar? How much total tonnage of materials would we be able to divert from the waste stream? What are the benefits in terms of social and environmental benefits? We can measure that in terms of reduced greenhouse gas emissions and see how that compares to the climate action plan. Other benefits are things like job creation, revenue from materials gain, or cost reduction measures. You're not paying for disposal, you're not paying for other aspects of waste management that we're currently paying for. What are the costs? Obviously a very important consideration. If you're going to build a new system, whether it's a program or a facility, what are the capital costs? What are the operation and maintenance costs? What are your labor costs? How are they going to look over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 plus years? What are the challenges to implementation? What permitting are you going to require? What additional infrastructure and land requirements do you have? If you're going to build a facility, will it occupy 5 acres or 50 acres? Those are things that we need to know and will affect how easy they're going to be to implement. And then what training is required? Is something quite simple? Do we have a lot of experience in the city already? Or is something going to be something that requires a lot of additional training for people to be able to implement it? A fifth one is our timeline. Is this going to be something we can implement in short term, medium term, and long term? And when we do implement it, what kind of timeline would we expect to see before we really realize the benefits of that program? Because it can be a little bit disheartening if people aren't prepared for it, to spend a lot of money and effort implementing a new program. And 5 years in, you've seen a real small incremental blip in waste reduction, because things can often take time. Everything operates on an S-curve. You have a lot of effort at the beginning, very little gain often. Then you get a period where it takes off, and for not much additional effort, you get a lot of performance improvement. And then eventually it will tail off again when you reach a kind of steady state condition. And being aware of and having some expectations for what that timeline is going to be can stop us thinking that something's failed because we didn't see an impact after 2 years or 3 years. So it's important for us to be able to put together some boundary conditions to assess that. And then again, as I mentioned, an important factor is experience. Not only DPW or other city officers experience with a particular program, but what experience does the private sector have? And what can we learn from other jurisdictions, such as the ones that we were looking at in our benchmarking analysis? So we finally get to the options that we're considering. So first of all, most importantly, let's look at what we can do to reduce waste being generated in the first place. We know that's the most important thing. It'll require significant political action and a lot of behavioral changes by all of us, not just as consumers and residents, but also by the businesses in the city, etc. But they're things that can be done because other people have shown that they can be done. As we mentioned, these are major goals of the sustainability plan and the food waste reduction strategy, so they fit the city's strategy in terms of where it wants to go. And some examples of things that we would look at are obviously reducing food wastage, drawing in organizations such as the Maryland Food Bank to help with that, looking at legislation that could be enacted to get large generators of food waste, currently grocery stores, large restaurants, etc., and building programs where that food, instead of being wasted, gets channeled towards entities like the food bank. We can also look at fix-it and repair clinics. I, for one, am often very frustrated where you have a suitcase and a wheel falls off. The suitcase is still great, but you can't get anyone to fix the wheel, and therefore the whole suitcase becomes unusable. So we can do a lot more in terms of having places where we can fix stuff that's broken, and then we don't need to buy new ones, and we don't need to dispose of old ones. And then similarly, material and resource sharing with entities like the Baltimore Community Tool Bank stops us all having to have our own stuff, because if we know that there are organizations out there where we can get things, we can share things, then you have less material being bought, and that means less material being disposed of. Second option then is waste is waste recycling and collection of waste and recycling. How could we change that or provide more access? And we note that we need to address some immediate concerns that people in the city have told us about. There is litter issues, there is illegal dumping issues. They're all part of collection, and we need to build that into our plan. We can't just have a plan that provides aspirations for the future. The plan needs to also address people's immediate concerns. So we need to bear that in mind. Improving the way or changing the way that we collect waste is a major goal of the sustainability plan. And some examples include increased access, so providing more access to recycling in senior residence homes or in multifamily apartment buildings. As we've talked about, providing more recycling opportunities in public spaces, particularly during special events when there are people there that we can rely on to help make that happen. And then also changing the way that we collect material and certainly pay for how material is collected. So an example is a pay-as-you-throw program where you get charged potentially by the bag for every bag of trash that you generate, but your recycling is either free or collected at a much reduced rate. So you really try to encourage people to put material, to first of all buy materials that are recyclable, and second of all make sure those materials get into the recycling stream and not into the disposal stream. There can be a lot of challenges associated with that. The obvious one being that if you're paying for trash and you're not paying for recycling, then everything becomes recyclable. So you need to find ways of making sure that people just don't put all their trash in recycling. But again, we can learn from what others have done. A number of jurisdictions have been pretty successful there. Our third option then is diversion of food scraps and other organics. We really want to encourage. We saw in that table that I presented earlier, there's 175, maybe 200,000 tons of food waste being generated in the city that currently goes to Bresco and is incinerated or goes to the landfill and generates methane. We do a lot more with that. It complements the food waste reduction measures that we talked about earlier. It'll require some separate infrastructure and systems to allow us to isolate that food waste and organic material and process it separately. And again, it's a major goal of the city's sustainability plans. So examples of what we would like to encourage are things like more backyard composting and more community composting projects like the one on Silver Street. We might be looking at separate curbside collection. So this photo here is from San Francisco, where they have 3 bins rather than just 2. They have their trash bin, they have their recycling bin, and they also have their organics bin, and they're all collected separately. Bear in mind that that means there's an extra bin in your house. We have to deal with the costs and also the other issues associated with that. And then we can also look at developing new processing capacity on a quite large scale. So the city could run a large composting facility or a few medium-sized composting facilities. We could also look at anaerobic digestion as an alternative to composting, or some blend between anaerobic digestion and composting. But overall, the goal would be to get all of that food waste, the 25% chunk of our pie chart out of the disposal stream and into the recycling stream. A fourth option then, diversion of C&D material and wood waste in particular, enjoys very high support amongst residents. Based on the survey we have, again, it's a major goal of the sustainability plan. And it can be helped by having policies and incentives that really encourage us to deconstruct all properties rather than just demolish them. Look for what material is valuable and can be saved before we send them to the wrecking ball without further consideration. So we have a number of people in the city that do this. Second Chance is one of them. And if people have specific questions about what all we do in this regard, I'd really encourage them to ask Mark Foster, because he's way more of an expert in that than I am. The city has a wood waste recycling yard, and we can look and talk with that yard about what they're doing and what more they can do, what they would like to do in terms of increasing the amount of wood that they can handle. And then we can also look at developing a new state-of-the-art C&D recycling center, so a materials recovery facility that's focused on construction and demolition material, separating materials into different components so that we can repurpose them, reuse them, resell them, etc. The fifth item then is bulk trash management, providing additional opportunities either for curbside collection of these materials or more ability for people to take them somewhere where instead of them just being disposed of, they can be repurposed, recycled. These are quite nice because they're very highly visible things for people in the city to see. And when people, I kind of think of them as being inspirational. When you see a lot of opportunities for recycling your couch, your mattress, your carpets, those kind of things, it just kind of builds a feeling in the city of we do recycling rather than we do disposal. So it can be a very visible and very positive program in that regard. Again, we can make use of the existing facilities that we have in the city, like Second Chance, who are an outlet for used furniture and other household items that are in good enough condition. One concept that people have looked at is a resource recovery facility, or what's called an eco-plant, where you have all of your processing in one place so that when waste comes in and recycling comes in, things get separated into different streams. You've got composting over there, you've got some construction and demolition management going on over here, producing an aggregate for building. You've got someone crushing concrete here, and as you work through the system, you've got a swap shop in another place where you can bring things that are still in working order that you don't want them and someone else may want them. So that's one thing we can look at. And then there are also drop-off depots that follow the same sort of line. And all of these are, rather than us taking our bulky items and just throwing them in the trash at a drop-off facility, looking for places where there would be people willing to repurpose and recycle those items. Which leads us into our sixth item, which is providing some expanded options. Expansion in terms of better services, more facilities, but also a wider range of materials being accepted. And some examples of those include having some mobile drop-off facilities, so a few times a month or sometime you can have these mobile facilities in neighborhoods at a well-publicized time, give you an additional opportunity to do some recycling, expand the range of materials accepted. So let's look at something like this facility in Los Angeles, which is doing mattress recycling, also carpets and other things. And then a number of jurisdictions have developed what they call charm facilities, centers applied to materials. So that's where, similar to the eco-park concept, you would be able to take materials that can't be recycled anywhere else, and they get handled here by specialist vendors that are looking for particular materials. So that kind of gets us through what I think of as the hard infrastructure options, things that, it's easy for an engineer to think about how you'd implement. It's either a facility or a program, or it's more trucks, it's more bins, etc. But there are some soft infrastructure components that are required in order for these things to be successful. So examples include making changes to our policies, regulations, the way we fund solid waste within our city budget. Yes.
Are we going to have a chance to provide input ourselves?
Yes.
Okay.
We want to look at improving some of the city's administration and operational services, including 311, which people express some frustration with, particularly in terms of reaction times for dealing with litter issues or illegal dumping issues. And then finally, just sticking the carrot at the end, we need a combination of education and enforcement measures to get everyone to participate in things in the right way. So, overall, that's a package of things that, based on what people have told us, based on the research we've done, based on looking at what other jurisdictions have done, we think we're going to be moving forward with our analysis of how do we increase recycling based on looking at this set of options that we have here. May not necessarily include all of these. In fact, it's likely not to include everything that I've shown now, but it may include some other examples as we get more deeply into it. But certainly, in terms of the major categories of things that we're looking to do to really move the needle and improve our recycling, this is where we're going with the study. So at that point, I can leave you. I know I've taken more time than I was originally allocated, but you know, we can stay as long as is necessary to answer any questions that people have. At this point, I'll hand back over to Ross.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So I'm going to turn the light on. Thank you. And just because I don't know if everyone has a loud voice or not, I'll walk around with this microphone and give it to you. Just as a reminder, the goal here is so Jeremy did a good job, I think, of giving you an awful lot of information. I know it's a lot to absorb in 45 minutes or an hour here, but all of this information will be available for you to look at later also. So now we have some time for you to ask questions about what you heard. Is there something that you're not clear on? Was something not as you might have expected it to be? Do you have a question about any of the data? Do you have a question about any of the options that Jeremy discussed for further study in this work? Any types of questions, clarifications, additional information that we can provide to you? You want to speak up?
Okay, so hey, my name is Sanjay, Energy Justice Network, Jerry. So I read the waste sort data from the winter bit, and I was a little curious, because I know the city is not very good at this either, but I felt like while the quadrant thing makes a lot of sense, there are very distinctly different neighborhoods that do and do not recycle within those communities, and then they also are likely to have potentially a slight difference in what they're collecting. And so I think it's accurate to an extent, but I think it's necessary that we like really dig down into the communities that are certainly less likely to recycle, because those are the ones that need the most access in the first place, which are probably at the 4% or lower type of thing, similar to Chicago's wards. So I'm curious if there is a more, or if there will be a suggestion in the moving forward policy, something that Baltimore County does, is that they have the neighborhoods broken down and determining their waste rate and their recycling rate that you can view online, as opposed to the way that it's currently structured where you don't have that. So I'm wondering if that could be incorporated into the suggestions moving forward.
Okay. So I don't know, so some of these questions may be good for Jeremy to respond to, some may not, and I'll just we're just going to work together to figure out which ones fit that case.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good point. At the moment, we've broken these down into quadrants just because that's how the city manages their fleet. So when I was trying to make sure that I got a decent representation of trucks across the city delivered to my waste sorting area, the best I could do was make sure that I got equal numbers from each quadrant. I didn't actually know until the truck arrived what their collection route was. So we would interview the driver when he had arrived and try to get him to describe where he collected the trash from. We didn't include that in the report, but we do have that information. It's hard for me to really target specific neighborhoods or streets or collection routes. I kind of get what I get in some ways depending on when the truck arrives. I can do 6 waste sorts in a day with my team. And so I'm trying to get a truck every 2 hours or so that I don't end up with being overwhelmed with material all at once. So it can be a little bit hard to really control that. But it's a point well taken, and to the extent that we can, we'll definitely try and at least get collection routes in summer that are different to the ones that we collected on in winter, so that we're getting a more distributed view of waste generation and recycling in the city. There are obviously inherent flaws in any kind of sampling program. We're doing 8 days of sampling. We can do 6 trucks a day. The city's generating 1.6 million tons of trash. So there's some inaccuracy there.
This is a follow-up question. Let's say you...
Can I just ask you to introduce yourself?
I'm sorry, my name is Neil Seldman. And you did one trash sort, and let's say you came up with that there was 20% plastic. Now you're going to do another one in the summer, and let's say there's going to be 25% plastic, or maybe 15% plastic. How would that impact your decision on setting up a recycling collection program?
Well, I mean, I think at first glance we would combine the 2 numbers and try and get an average as being representative.
Okay, if I can interrupt, aren't these things very expensive? to do a sort?
It is expensive, yeah.
$100,000 perhaps?
Yeah.
My point is, why should the city do it several times when you're going to wind up averaging? And the difference in the amount of plastic, the amount of paper, the amount of organics, I don't think is going to impact how we should collect and recycle. So why do this 3-4 times? And that's $500,000.
Well, actually, I mean, that's a good point. Initially, the scope of work called for 4 waste sorts, so we were going to do quarterly.
Right.
Something to try and see the real seasonal difference. It was decided quite wisely and along the lines of where you're going that there's not going to be that much variation through the year. So we did elect to go winter and summer just because we know there's going to be variability in yard waste, for example, and that's something we really want to get a handle on because at the moment that material is not sufficiently diverse. If it's collected as trash.
Yes, but last question on this, I know this gentleman has questions too. My point is, you have to have a yard debris collection and processing system. And that system is not going to change whether the yard debris goes up or down in the winter.
Right.
Operation hours will change, but the system and infrastructure won't change. Never mind, I just...
I mean, you've got to start with some data, right? And the city has no data at all.
I see.
So
Okay, that's very helpful, thank you.
It's a point well taken. It's not really much more expensive for us to do a winter and a summer with 16 days total, 6 months apart, than to do 16 days all at once at one time of the year. And we thought it did at least give us some ability to capture variability. There are waste sorts from counties around Baltimore that we're looking at, of course. There was a study done 18 months or so ago by MDE. We're looking at that data. So we're not just using ours. We're trying to use as much data as is available to try and temper it. But
Thanks.
Other questions from the audience? Ask a question, do you want to make a comment?
So I wanted to know in terms of an organics ban on the landfill. Oh, hi, good evening everyone. My name is David Richardson. I work at the Baltimore Office of Sustainability. So I was just curious in terms of a landfill ban, organics ban on the landfill, and considering just kind of overall policy implications for this work. You mentioned some policy recommendations, but I wasn't sure like what direction that was going in and what your specifics were around that. Also, to the point made earlier, I think it is important that we consider the transparency in our waste management system in the city. I think that's been a historic problem, especially for communities of color and lower income communities not having much say or input in that process. In New York, they have kind of like solid waste advisory boards, and I would advise that a recommendation to that effect go into the report as well. I think that was a few questions in there, but take whichever one you want.
Sure, I mean, well, I agree with you about having an advisory. I mean, the more input you can get from stakeholders and the better that that's organized so that it comes at us in a coordinated way as opposed to ad hoc. I like that, so, I would definitely support that moving forward. I think the long-term success of any program that requires resident and stakeholder participation for it to be successful is only going to be successful if you have champions within communities to try and make sure that things are being done to the best effect they can. With regard to the yard waste ban, I mean, Maryland has a yard waste disposal ban, so yard waste is
an
not...
organics ban on the land, not just yard waste.
Just yard waste.
Well, organics overall.
Right. So we're looking at organics overall, but at the moment that material is just being wasted.
And is this presentation available publicly? Will it be posted online?
It will be, yes.
Okay.
So at the end of this meeting, we'll put a video of the entire meeting plus the presentation. And I think your last component was about policies and regulations that would be required. That's a complicated question, and there are a lot of moving parts in the way this plan gets done. And there are a lot of things that interactively affect each other. The way I see it happening probably is going to be, we're going to really look at some programs that we think are going to be successful but might need some regulatory or political support. But we're going to move forward with those because we know that they can achieve the needle moving that we want. And then when we we look at what we need in terms of infrastructure for those, then we look at what soft support we need in the way of policy changes, regulatory changes, enforcement, education, etc. So I want to let it's probably because I'm an engineer, I'm kind of letting the hard technology drive the soft. That approach won't work for everything, but it's kind of my starting point.
Okay, so a question or two here. You want the microphone? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, Alan Cohen. I live in what's called Roldan, between Roldan Park and Hampton. Anyway, I came here thinking we were being supposed to provide input too, and I had a whole bunch of suggestions. I could email them.
That's a good idea.
I didn't get the survey. I don't know, did everyone get it, or was it kind of random?
I mean, it was available to everyone. It was publicized as widely as we.
Okay,
as we could.
yeah, well, I'm sorry
I
to-
guess some people fell through that.
Anyway, I strongly agree with the need to increase access to recycling in public spaces. And for example, if possible, it would be wonderful to do it this summer at Artscape. Because when I go there, I see, thousands or tens of thousands of plastic bottles in the trash cans. I think what a waste. And let's say walking paths, things of that sort. I don't know if you probably couldn't have one-to-one trash to recycling, but to have at least many more so that people would be encouraged to recycle. I think the banning plastic bags would be wonderful. I think, didn't Jim Kraft introduce several bills to do that in city council? I think he did.
Years ago,
Yeah, a few years ago, and to revive that, if other cities can do it, we can, because it generates so much waste. And one idea I had for sort of incentives, to create incentives to pay for waste and get paid for recycling is good, but possibly even a competition among some neighborhoods or neighborhoods or blocks to see who can recycle the most, or recycle and or compost the most. And the winner gets some kind, maybe, I don't know, block party or something like that. Healthy Harbor Initiative has sponsored a green stoop challenge, in which they're trying to encourage planting of trees in front of yards as much as possible, and using those spaces for greening, growing other plants. And I think they didn't get funding they needed, but that was supposed to be a competition. And something like that might get people into it a little more and excited, and not just think of it as a chore.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And finally, I think to employ as many people as possible. I think you're saying you're trying to do this, especially residents, especially low income, on construction and demolition, recycling, food waste recycling, and training might have to be provided, perhaps groups like Civic Works or others, maybe with public and private funding, so we don't have to shoulder all of it. Anyway, and I'll try to give email, send some other way.
Yeah, thanks for that. And
We'll
there,
provide the contact.
I'll put it up here now because we know we're asking questions. So yeah, at the bottom, there's the email address and the website, so you can just take a moment to jot that down. And for all of you, you can offer your additional suggestions through email. Would you like the mic?
Hi, my name is Sarah Kozer. I think that was the best DPW presentation I've ever been to. I love your ideas. I think they're pretty amazing, and I hope that we can employ most of them. I have a couple questions for you. When I took a tour of the waste management facility a couple years ago, and it's a pretty amazing facility.
The material recovery facility.
In Woodbridge, I guess. Elkton.
Kit Kat Road.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
We went there a couple of weeks ago. It's
Incredible. Technology is amazing. Can you tell me now, on this day, where our plastic recyclables are going? I know they go to waste management, they get sorted, and then where do they
At the
go?
moment, I believe they are currently shipping them to Malaysia and Indonesia. And
Because China's no longer taking it.
China's not taking them. I think a little bit to Turkey, but
they
primarily
are
it's
going
still
out.
to Asia. They're still going out. None of it is being recycled here.
So that was my question. Is there a long-term plan for recycling in our country, in our location? And is that part of what you're thinking?
Well, it's a good question. At the moment, there's a thought to have a congressional bill to address the recycling crisis that every jurisdiction is facing by having these markets no longer accessible or greatly reduced in terms of how we can access them. I think quite a lot of improvement, or quite a lot of scope has already been achieved with cardboard and paper recycling onshore as opposed to offshore, but I think with plastic, much less has been achieved. There's been some movement with advanced technologies that convert plastics into fuels, but they are expensive, difficult. A lot of people work pretty well, small scale, try to scale them up, but certainly recycling plastic is at a crisis point at the moment. And there are increasing news stories that show us that even the material that we do diligently separate and put in our recycling, it gets handled in Kit Kat and shipped out as high quality recycling, so it gets to Malaysia, then doesn't get recycled. You know, it sits in a village and someone sets fire to it, or it just ends up in the river. So there are some significant challenges to the global recycling system that everyone's experiencing. We're experiencing it, Europe's experiencing it. Action is being taken, but it's slow because you need international agreements. Yeah.
Thank you.
And, you know, I wish I had a more positive answer to you.
Well, but it's
the
on
important
your
thing is,
radar and you're thinking about it.
and the important thing is for all of us to keep recycling, because at least if we're pulling that material out, keeping it separate, keeping it clean, we have a opportunity. If we stop doing it,
Thanks for those comments. Do you have another question?
Yeah, just some follow-up. So in terms of the competition bit, we've actually run a couple programs like that in Cherry Hill and Westport, and rates certainly were significantly higher when we provided access and that incentive. So that is a thing that has been done so far. We're doing one more in education, exactly. Yeah, and we're doing one more in Morrill Park in a month or so. But I had two things. One, there is a market, and I think that that's been the kind of the lack of communication by recycling entities and what have you, that there still is a market for a lot of these materials, even in the Northeast, and so we can make money off of that without shipping it off to Southeast Asian countries. But also, I was curious if Geosyntec knows about the Beyond 34 campaign. I take that as a not necessarily. So, okay, so Beyond 34 is between the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Walmart, Target, 2 or 3 other like national environmental recycling firms, and what have you. And what they've done is that they did their initial pilot in Orlando and analyzed the feasibility of moving toward a more zero-waste economy. Projected out that there could be 8,500 jobs created in the Orlando metro area simply from closing the loop. As well as the overall value of materials that people are sending to landfill or incineration as opposed to circular situations. And then Cincinnati is the next city that they're doing. So they're all intending to get past the 34% rate that is the overall diversion rate of the country by utilizing corporate and local entities and actually having an assessment of it. And so they do have the pilot report out, and they just chose Cincinnati a couple months ago as their next city, who just developed a zero waste plan too. So yeah, I think it'd be good to.
if you have any information on the recycling markets that are available in the Northeast, as opposed to international, anything that you share with us, I made a note to look up Beyond 34, but if you have information, if you could just send it to me or send it to
Yeah, absolutely.
Highly into address, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Do you want a mic?
Hey, hello, my name is Dan Carter. I'm from the Glen Oak area. So, originally from Florida, I've been in this area for 10 years, Baltimore City, obviously. And going home recently, I was reminded how Florida does an outstanding job of having the tree coverage over power lines, infrastructure cleared away. I've been through many hurricanes growing up, and very seldom do we lose power. In this area, totally not the case. And one of the key reasons that is because of the cost of people to even trim back The cost is highly driven because of the cost of disposal. I don't know why it costs so much to dispose of tree limbs. I don't care how big they are. So if a tree costs $600 to cut back, $300 to $400 of that is just in the disposal cost when they take it to the landfill. Why are we not using the incinerator in Baltimore City to grind this stuff up and then creating electricity? We're drastically reducing the cost to trim back the trees, which saves the city money on contracts to have this done. It also allows individual homeowners to be able to afford this service. You increase the demand, you increase jobs, you provide more fuel that doesn't pollute the air, going to the incinerator to offset some of the pullback from the other more polluting materials. You would lose money in what was taken out to the landfills, but you would save money in what the city can charge lower to cut back those trees. And if you make it so that only people get free incineration, landscaping businesses, tree removal services, get that free disposal at the incinerator if their business is incorporated in Baltimore City. That doesn't mean it's run in Baltimore City, but at least the taxes from that business will come directly back to the city. And all surrounding counties will then probably bring in their tree disposal. So you'll have fuel for the incinerator and be able to better afford removing hazards to the electrical grid for the next 20 years as we try to figure out a plan to phase out the incinerator altogether.
Thanks for that suggestion. Thank you for that. If you haven't had a chance yet, I'm starting to have the same people, which is great, but if you haven't had a chance, I want to make sure you have a chance to ask any questions or offer any comments that you have.
Just want to point out that Camp Small is doing exactly what you're saying, and it's a project of the Office of Sustainability, and it's one of the most creative projects in the country because it was financed by a loan from the city, and they're paying it back, plus saving the city a lot of money.
So what is the startup cost if the incinerator says that we'll take this stuff and compost it for free? What is the startup cost on the part of the city?
Well, the incinerator is the largest polluter in the city, so we don't want to feed it. And the material, the organics, the trees, the wood, is worth a lot of money, and Camp Small sells their material and is making money for the city. So, Camp Small is very small. It's only 2 acres. It used to be 4, but they lost 2 acres, whatever. But a series of those facilities around the city would answer your problem without any incineration, and it would make the city money, as you suggest.
Thanks for that. Okay, we're creeping up on 8 o'clock. I don't want to rush us, but I do want to make sure that you get back to your lives. Are there other questions that you have for Jeremy about the information that you heard or other comments that you want to share at this time? Just create space for others.
Quickly, you spoke about other cities that have advisory boards for different sectors of recycling or waste disposal. I was wondering if there are any in Baltimore or plan to develop any, because that way you have, if you have any, I'm sorry I missed them, that would be a way to get more citizen interest and input and maybe more connections to the communities.
Sure, I'm probably not the best person to answer that question because I'm a consultant to the city, but I think, from what I understand, the Office of Sustainability, for example, has a lot of advisory outreach type boards that can be provided. So, for example, the sustainability plan and the food waste reduction plan they just put together a lot of internal and external advisory. For the project that I'm working on at the moment, we don't have a direct advisory board or steering committee that is providing other aspects of what this thing does.
I can provide some context. So the Office of Sustainability has the Commission on Sustainability that advises on various sustainability initiatives across the city, but in terms of any specific kind of like solid waste specific advisory board, the city doesn't have, to my DPW doesn't have that to my knowledge right now. So I made the comment about the transparency in the suggestion for some type of advisory board that could support the city in that capacity and this simultaneously increase transparency.
Washington DC has a citizen advisory board. We meet once every 3 months. It was established by the environmental community and the
Okay.
Other questions, other comments?
I just wanted to provide a quick point of clarity about what's being uploaded online. Right now, the survey, waste sort information, information for community meetings, that's all up online, but the actual presentation, we're not gonna post until after the second community meeting because we don't want people not to attend the community meetings. They think they have the presentation. So I just wanted to put that out there. And then, if you don't mind, just CC lesswaste@gmail.com. As you might have heard, we had some issues with our computer system, so we set up a backup plan. If you go to the website and just put in you want to send information, I'll get it, but I'm not quite sure what's going on right now.
What is your name, please?
It's lesswaste@gmail.com. My name is Christina Bryant. I get those emails, and then you can also go onto the website and click leave a message, or I want to find out more information, and that comes directly to me. I'm just waiting. So we're still waiting on our email boxes.
So the website is still working,
Yes.
and all of the links at the website are working, of which one is an email address. And if you click on that, it will get to Christina, and then it will get to me.
And then Jeremy, what's the timeline again for finishing the report and actually providing the recommendations you all are doing? Is it going to still be December or will it be sooner, hopefully, maybe?
It's still officially December.
Okay.
You know, we've had some challenges. We're still working towards December.
There's a comment in the back.
Yeah, thanks. Interesting presentation. I appreciate that you mentioned the Fulton Street Garden and community-led composting. I'm not sure if you know that the city has threatened to take that land away. I was wondering if you're going to recommend that they include protections for community-oriented, so things like those composting programs.
Sure. I mean, I'm going to make the recommendation that community composting gardens have a big role to play in terms of managing organics. Frankly, if we can get you to do it rather than DPW having to do it, everyone wins. So I would not single out any facility in particular, but overall, our position is going to be that DPW should encourage, incentivize, support, do whatever is necessary to get as many of these community gardens operational, sustainable, and
Right. Well, so for example, the Philip River Street Garden has, an adopt a lot program, right? And the city can revoke adopt lots, basically if they want to, notice. And so, would you say, if you adopt a lot to start a composting program, you have some sort of protection from that, right?
Sure.
That seems reasonable.
It seems reasonable. I mean, why not put those lots to productive use as a facility for sure. So yes, we would make that recommendation that DPW should do whatever it can to support these entities so that they can exist for the long term as part of the waste management future solution for the city.
Thank you.
That's what we would do.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to have our friend who brought her family here to have a chance, because she went through such an effort to be here.
Hello, everyone. I really appreciate everybody. This is my daughter, Jessica. When we moved into the Bella Edison, when we moved into the Bella Edison community, she was 2 and my son was 1. And over that time, we have seen and have picked up, I guess, tons of trash. And we still own the property. There is a storm drain right in front of our home that every time I went out, I had to pick up the storm drain. So I always tell everybody I adopted the storm drain because I always wanted to make sure it was clean. And I made this effort to come to this meeting tonight because I took a documentary class and I chose the topic of the prevention of litter into the Chesapeake Bay. And it's on YouTube. It's called Baltimore Pick It Up. So I have a lot of ideas and that I would like to bring to the organization that I've found out about. Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Public Works, Blue Water, Baltimore, all of them sent me pictures and helped me put that documentary together. So I hope it helps with the efforts that are here, that everyone that are here putting out the effort to make Baltimore, make our city, make our state much cleaner. So thank you everybody for hearing.
What's it called again, please, and what's your name?
Well, my name is Janice McBride, McBroyde, and it's called Baltimore Pick It Up, and it's on YouTube. So thank you.
Just one last thing. How are the recommendations going to be shaped? Are they going to be like an actual hierarchy, or are they just going to be like, oh, you know, we could do all these different things at an equal footing? Like, how is that going to result?
Well, it should come out in the 7-point methodology that we have, where we look at how much innovation we get, costs, benefits, etc. Things I'm hoping are going to be quite self-evident there in terms of which ones we would recommend overall. But there are some other aspects of things that are important, even if the needle doesn't get moved very much. So, for example, having recycling at special events and public events is a very visible way of saying, hey, we recycle. So it may not generate a lot of material, but it's an important thing to push because it makes a big difference in terms of how people perceive recycling. So it's hard to balance a lot of things that have very subjective qualities in an objective way, but we're going to try our best.
Well, let's show a quick follow-up to what this gentleman was saying about the small.
Camp Small.
Camp Small. So, again, piggybacking off of that, we not to increase what's going to the incinerator and the air pollution, but studies have shown that by adding compost to landfills, you increase the rate of decomposition of the trash out there. So, there's many ways to, again, I'm looking at the infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure, the trees, also the dumping, which is another part, is, I see people throwing trash blatantly out the window of their cars all the time. And it's very upsetting, the blatant disregard. Can we work with law enforcement to get more aggressive, including homes that allow trash to proliferate outside, whether it's, seeing what's happening on the streets or around people's homes, to be more aggressive about those fines. Financial penalties seems to be the greatest incentive to curb people's attitudes towards this. And lastly, is there a way to get, like for high schools, they require some level of community service? Can high schools pick neighborhoods and communities and set that as an area where if the kids go out and pick that up, that creates, that goes greatly towards the community service. Even if they pick it up and it takes them an hour, they get 10 hours. There's technology there. The kids can take a photograph before and after. It doesn't require a whole lot of oversight on the part of school administrators. It's just the assignment and getting young kids involved and being involved in their community and seeing the difference and feeling the difference of a clean community versus a dirty one. Right?
Yeah. So it's a very good point. There are a number of really interesting innovations out there. I saw one recently where there's a cell phone-based app that does exactly that. It rewards people for picking up litter. And it does it by, I can't remember exactly how they measure it, but they have a way of doing so. And you get rewarded by being given minutes to your cell phone. So the incentive is, it's all managed online. It's an app like Google itself. It's trash pickup. The more trash you pick up, the more reward
it's imperative to get the kids involved and allow them to see and feel the difference of coming to a clean community without having to rely on someone outside of the community coming in and picking up their trash. I think that'll go a long way.
So I need to be mindful of the time, folks. It's at 8 o'clock, a little bit beyond. So thank you for taking time from your evenings to be with us. You see the contact address. Don't forget also lesswaste@gmail.com. The website is where to go for all the information. We have our final community meeting for this part of the project on Saturday, June 15th. Hope to see you all there. I'll be dressed more casually because it's Saturday. I decided I'm allowed to do that. And all of you are as well. Have a good evening. Thanks very much.